Ciao, Tayana Maina. I am a co-founder of the Museum of British Colonialism, a historian, and a digital heritage specialist. For the past 5 years, we have been documenting sites of detention around Kenya. These are sites that were set up between 1952 and 1960 during the state of emergency to force people who are suspected of being in the Mau Mau to confess and renounce the Mau Mau. This was a complex system of detention camps set up across the country that scholars estimate to be 100 or so, that was set up for the very purpose of extracting confessions, of detaining people far, far away from their communities, and in some situations, extremely violent and hard conditions to live in. One of the detention camps that was set up specifically to hold people who are considered a major threat to the colonial government because they had refused to renounce the Mau Mau was Manyani Camp.
So today was quite interesting. We visited Manyani, which was one of the most complex and if not the largest, one of the largest detention facilities in colonial Kenya. We've seen the detention centers being transformed into education facilities, which is schools, especially boarding schools. But this was quite interesting because it's manifested into a post-colonial prison facility.
There were no prisons in Kenya prior to colonialism, and systems of justice were really pretty much victim-centered, were more about recompense than sort of retribution towards the offenders. They were more focused on repairing, if you will, the rift that's caused within society by crime. But when the British came, prisons were one of the first things they brought. So they sort of introduced this idea of incarceration, of carceral in punitive incarceration. And so I think for a lot of people, prisons became these places of both abandonment and also sort of places of punishment and of dejection, of rejection by society. And until today, I mean, pretty much somebody goes into prison is disappeared. And I think when you look at it in a contemporary sense, we've got to remember we haven't been building prisons in Kenya. Lots of our prisons are still the same ones the British built. To a large extent. They're just staffed with many more people, filled with many more people, not really staffed.
The introduction of prisons, also policing, new types of court systems, was really justified by Europeans as part of this racist civilizing mission. So it was this idea that prisons were seen to be more humane than the wide range of justice practices that were used by African communities, which isn't the case. But this was the logic that was sort of underpinning it, this logic of white supremacy and this logic of anti-Blackness. And that shaped sort of who was seen as deviant, who was seen as criminal, and how people were punished.
The colonial powers wanted to keep a certain population outside of these cities. They wanted to control the economic power. They wanted that for themselves. And a lot of these offenses, officials can actually arrest people without actually having a warrant of arrest. So that allows law enforcement officials unfettered discretion to, target people based on the way they look, they walk, and so forth.
As MBC at the moment, we've just embarked on a project where we're mapping different forms of anti-Blackness within the African and global South context. And one of the key manifestations of anti-Blackness is through the prison industrial complex and through the policing complex and the assemblages of where both of them connect.
The weather here in Manyani is grueling. It's extremely hot. There's barely anything around, not to mention the continuous threat of wild animals, the lack of food, and also the poor sanitation within the camps. Hardcore detainees from all across Kenya were sent to Manyani Camp, some of them including people like J.M. Karaoke, who has written extensively about his experience here. Originally set up to hold 6,000 people, at its height, Manyani is said to have held 16,000 people, 10,000 more people than it was designed to hold. We are standing here on the foundation of what we believe is a holding cell, a solitary cell, or screening cell, one of many structures spread across more than 5 kilometers within the area that were believed to be part of the original detention camp. Today, as we stand here, nature has reclaimed most of these structures. There are trees growing out of foundations, yet the resilience of these structures is a testament to the grueling, egregious, and violent histories that took place here. In themselves, these buildings are archives that hold potential to tell the story of thousands of Kenyans who went through unspeakable acts of violence, the denial of their humanity during the colonial period. We have also conducted a number of oral history interviews that seek to understand exactly what the experience in this camp was like. Even though these experiences are different for each individual, they all have one thing in common, that Manyani was an incredibly difficult place to be in. As the only detention camp that was set up inside a national park, the conditions in Manyani were meant to dehumanize detainees at very many levels. The weather conditions are extremely hot. It's a semi-arid area, and it's quite difficult to work and to live in tin structures. So you can imagine the heat that was there at the time, given the structures that they were living in. This is coupled with poor sanitation within the detention camps, as well as lack of proper food and proper nutrition, which led to a whole range of diseases.
My name is Linda Ngari. I am a volunteer with the Museum of British Colonialism. As a person who's gone through the 844 system, there's things we read, there's things now we get to realize in real life that kind of may not coincide with what we were taught or what was deliberately omitted from the curriculum. So just seeing how the camps were like, being taken through where people would be held in detention for the first time in my life was eye-opening, so to say. And I think I speak for a lot of Kenyans, how we just don't know a lot about our history, which is awkward because you don't even know how to feel about the very experiences of the people who, you know, fought for your independence. It was interesting to learn how I don't know a lot of things. How, for example, we were told about how these detention camps are similar in different locations. This is in Ukambani area. It's the same in central region. So I don't know. I don't think that's in our curriculum, and I don't think a lot of Kenyans know about that. So it would be good to take a lot of Kenyans through what has been found out through the MPC project. And I hope other people will learn as much as I have.
And that's what they have been till today. They exist to protect the people in power from those they rule over. So to protect the government officials and a small elite from the rest of the people from whom they are essentially stealing, which was essentially their role under colonialism. You know, they weren't set up to, make life better for Patrick. They were here to protect the whole scheme of extraction.
The majority of people who took over the prison system, for example, in Uganda after independence, had been trained by the British, right? Had been trained under the colonial system. And although some were critical of it, a lot of people felt that these traditions of sort of militarism and masculinity in many cases were sort of traditions that should be upheld. And we're really proud of that training, and as Patrick said, there's so many continuities from the physical buildings themselves, right? It's the same prisons, Kamiti prison in Kenya, Luzira prison in Uganda, but also the same uniforms. And when I would interview prison staff, they would also often talk about the uniforms, which even those haven't necessarily changed, right? So there's this strong kind of nostalgia and heritage around the colonial origins of the prison service or the police.
And so South Africa really has a good normative framework in terms of the protection of people. Unfortunately, even though those norms are there and the standards are there, it obviously has significantly changed from how it was in the past. But there are still some of those conditions of detention that we are still struggling with. We do still see an emphasis on punishment, unfortunately. And then there's also the heightened call still to confine people for longer terms through the minimum sentences.
My name is Anthony Maina. Currently, I'm the curator in charge, National Museum of Kenya in Murang'a County. I've been working with the MBC since the year 2019. And in fact, I can say today is my biggest day in my life. I can say so because it is the first time I've been able to see a detention outside Mount Kenya region and one of the biggest detention camp by then in the Republic. Most of the detention camps have never been gazetted as national monuments. And in fact, I'm the first person maybe in the National Museum of Kenya to visit such a site, a very important site, Manyani. It is good for these structures to be preserved because for the role they played during the liberation struggle of our country, because most of our parents passed through these detention camps. So it is good for them to be kept as heritage and to be gazetted as well. They are part of our history.
When I think of sites like Manyani, I think that we tend to feel that they exist within a particular point in time in history, and that history doesn't move on into the present. What we are trying to do with this work, what we are doing at both an organizational and a personal level, is to see these connections, to examine how they affect our present, to examine how they affect how we as Africans, as Black people, are treated and how we treat each other in regards to the colonial foundations that are so heavily underpinning so many of the institutions we have in our country today.